How you guys doing today? Welcome, welcome, welcome. I almost showed you guys what we were going to be reading today. Welcome to Storytime with today. Your friendly neighborhood librarian at Haddington. Woo woo. How you guys doing? So, for Women's Month, I decided that I was going to talk about one of my favorite African Americans, who was one of the first African American women to basically fly. So, I chose her. So the book that I chose is a little bit different from what I normally do. So basically, the characters in this book represent the oral history portrayed by actual friends, relatives, and associates of Bessie Coleman. That's the woman who we're going to be talking about. However, the voices and styles of speech and characterization are all imaginary devices used to bring Bessie's true story to life. So, in addition to the several composition of characters and the different concepts of monologues that have been created in order to maintain the chronological of events, a special thanks to pilots Deborah Clary and Shirley Russell for their valuable insights, suggestions, and general assistance in guiding this background material for this project. And I have to actually thank the authors too, but we're going to get to that first. I wanted to get to you, we're going to be talking about Bessie. She is the story of the aviation. Her real name is Elizabeth Coleman, and the story is by Nikki Grimes, illustrated by E.B Lewis. Let's get into it. So the way this story is going to work today is that I'm going to choose the monologues because the book is really, really a lot. So I'm going to choose the monologues that we can use, and we're going to go from there. I already have them pre-selected, so if you want to check this book out for yourself, put it on hold. Talking about Bessie, the story of Aviator Elizabeth Coleman. So Bessie Coleman was born in Atlantic, Texas at a time when segregation, with its Jim Crow laws and racist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, was a way of life in the South, and lynchings of African American men were a commonplace. So-called separate but equal schools did little to prepare African American children to compete in the world of business and academics, because many whites considered African Americans to be mentally inferior, and descendants of African slaves were only expected to be field hands or factory workers. As a result, there were little talk of technology in the cotton fields of Bessie's world. Certainly, in 1892, when Bessie was born, few African American people even dreamed of mastering machines that could fly. That's cool. Bessie was 11 years old when Orville and Wilbur Wright made their first successful airplane flight near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina on December 17, 1903. The flight took place on a narrow strip of sand called Kill Devil Hill, 1,000 miles from Texas Cabin, where Bessie lived. Yet the lives of Bessie and the Wright brothers were forever linked. All were pioneers in the field of aviation. Airplanes were widely used in airstrikes during World War I, but after the war, civilians had no use for machines or pilots who had flown them. Several years would pass before planes were used to transport passengers. Until then, pilots who wished to earn a living flying resorted to performing death-defying stunts, hundreds of feet up in the air at the outdoor circuses. These stunts or acrobatics required special skill, steady nerves, and split-second timing, and great physical strength. For each roll, loop, or nosedive, the pilot had to fight the natural force of gravity. There was no room for failure because failure often meant death. That's serious. Not surprising, these barnstormers, as they were called, were known for their daring. One of the most daring and dazzling of them was Elizabeth Bessie Coleman. So now we're going to take it up a notch. So now we're going to hear commentary and monologue from the people around Betsy that's going to tell Betsy's story. The form of the form of the following story is fictional, but the story itself is based on fact. Somewhere in the south side of Chicago, in a private parlor, 20 souls gathered to mourn the death of Bessie Coleman and share their memories of her. Many more had come to the house earlier that evening, but they had long gone. The grandfather clock reads 12:01, but no one seems to notice that the day has just slipped quietly into another. Bessie eyes the gathering family and friends and acquaintances from her place in the photo on the mantel behind them. "Hello, Mama," she whispers. Susan Coleman snaps her head around toward the mantel. She listens for a moment. There's only silence. Finally, she shakes her head and turns her attention to her ex-husband, George, who has started to speak. I love the watercolors. I really do. I love the watercolors by E.B Lewis. So wonderful. Sorry for the glare of the light, everybody. Can you see it all? Yeah. Works. Huh? So now George Coleman, Daddy. I remember that bone-chilling January day on 1892 when Bessie's first cry raised the roof off of that dirt floor cabin back in Texas. Our 10th chili was a fighting spirit, and though our 4 Coleman babies flew to glory, soon after their arrival I knew of the 13th born Bessie would survive. When she turned 2, we moved to Palmer Road near Mustang Creek in Wichita, Texas, where cotton was still king. The 3-room house I was built on, a quarter-acre bought with back-breaking labor and careful saving few colored men could manage, thanks to Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan. A man of African and Chautauqua blood, I was told that the hatred was the only reward to expect in life. Oklahoma was better suited to prosperity for me, if only my wife had agreed to follow. Of course, Bessie understood none of that. She was just a child then, spending happy days watering roses, weeding where corn and kale and peanuts grew out back, and molding mud pies for after cool spring rains. Sometimes I wish I had stayed. Oh, there we go. Now we're going to look at Susan Coleman. I love this illustration. I really do. This watercolor is amazing. I woke my Bessie before dawn on Sundays to bathe and dress her for church, being bound and determined that she was, like all my other children, should first learn the wisdom of the Lord and then the wisdom of the world. Bessie got her taste of the second at school after she turned 6. I could neither read nor write, but fixed it so my children would. I weekly pinched pennies to rent books from the library wagon, which come by the house twice a year, and still near I can still remember. Bessie's first book was the Bible. Each night I tend to the oil lamp, then I would sit while Bessie read the scripture. Her eyes glowed as they moved across the page. She stumbled over the baguettes, but mostly she'd read in a steady voice, pausing between verses to lick her lips as if the words were honey. I cried to see the joy Bessie took to reading. Somehow, I foreknew the grand use she would make of it one day. Okay. This is Nikki Coleman. Bessie had no time for foolishness after Papa left. There were 4 of us girls in the house, then plus Mama. Lila and Alberta were long gone, as were John, Walter, and Isaiah, our 3 older brothers, which meant by the age of 9, Bessie was the oldest child at home. Overnight, my big sister became a second mother, who cleaned and swept and cared for us while Mama kept another house across town. Bessie's rag doll rested on the rocker as its owner braced herself to face a spring or summer, fall or winter day of hauling water from the well and mopping floors and making meals atop. The old wood burning stove that warmed our cabin, Bessie's days seemed endlessly tiresome to me. But she took each one in stride. She didn't play no games. Neither should you. She get reading. Next, we're gonna look at the school teacher. See what the school teacher got to say. When it came to knowledge, Bessie was a miser, hoarding facts and figures like gold coins she was saving up to spend on something special. I'd watch her sometimes, poring over her lessons, lips pursed in concentration. Often when the subject turned to math, she'd glance up at me and I swear she'd get a sort of greedy look in her eyes, but maybe it was just my imagination. I did not imagine her persistence though. Come rain or shine, if work allowed, Bessie would attend the hot and summer, cold and winter one-room colored schoolhouse where I taught in Wichita. I'm butchering that. I'm sorry, but I can't pronounce that word in Texas. I did not imagine. Still bright as she was, I worried that her fine mind would soon be sacrificed to a life spent picking cotton or working in the mills like so many others had before. But after each harvest, she'd return to class, determined as ever to snatch up and pocket every tidbit of information and knowledge I could offer. Teacher, she'd say, one day I'm going to amount to something. Bless God, I need not have fretted in the least. That's what I'm talking about. We're going to go to Georgia Coleman. Here we go. Folks who met Bessie once left Wichita considered her allergic to elbow grease and manual labor, but I recall all the years she took in wash to help out with the bills and fill jelly jars with precious pennies towards her education. Laundering was more than just a notion then. Talk about some hard work. Listen, you had to boil the clothes in the tub, scrape and scrub them on a washboard. In a burning bath of soapy lye, that puckered tender skin. Next came the stain of wrinkling and washing, and dipping shirts in starch before hanging them out in the sun to dry. But your work still wasn't done. And you couldn't call it quits till you pressed each piece with a red-hot iron, careful not to scorch your fingers. Your good humor could easily dissolve into weeks' worth of dirty water. Bessie held her spirits high by saying over and over again, I won't be doing this forever. Look at that hard work. Okay. And we are skipping pages here, just so the fact that we can move through the book. My sister wasn't one to take a thing at face value, especially not thought or word or deed to do with race. Uncle Tom's Cabin was among Bessie's favorite books, and she made it one of hers though through her lively reading. Mom and the preacher style so perfectly we'd be in stitches. But I recall, after her first recital, she hotly announced, I'll never be a Topsy or an Uncle Tom. She had no respect for whatever the slave girl Topsy, who seemed incapable of self-improvement, or for Tom, who had too little race pride for Bessie's taste. She had no use for either, not when it came to picking role models anyhow. Bessie's habits of probing others' word king, I suppose, of studying those written by Booker T. Washington and Paul Laurence Dunbar. Sometimes I wondered how far their words could take her. By 23, she discovered a newspaper from Chicago which boasted of a better life up north and featured stories of powerful women of the race, writers, business tycoons, civil rights workers, like Ida B. Wells and Madame C. Walker and Mary Church Terrell. Full of hope and headstrong women like Betsy, she often wake me up at 3 a.m. in the morning, burning to discuss some new topic or report about our people she just read. I heard the wheels turn in her head long before that. Northbound train rolled through Texas and carried her away. Look at Betsy. I'm so proud of Betsy. Look at her leaving. She's about to make something of herself. No, she did make something of herself. Now we're gonna look at Walter. Look at that city. Oh, I love the illustrations. My sister was born for Chicago. In no time, Bessie seemed to fit right in. With the quality proud and stylish dressed ladies and gentlemen of the South Side who filed through Jesse Binger's bank at lunchtime or saltine by the office at the Chicago Defender or paraded in and out of countless other Negro businesses bordering the stroll. She loved the salons and hairdressers and restaurants and bars and nightclubs like Dreamland where Louis Armstrong blew all of our blues away. She'd come north by my invitation, though she'd always had a mind to leave the limits of the South. You can't make a racehorse out of a mule, our mother used to say. If you stay a mule, you'll never win the race. Bessie planned on winning if only she knew what. Each year she searched for the one trade or career she thought she might best suit her, never knowing what the vocation was or what might lead her to it. I don't understand how Bessie kept her focus fixed, but however long it took, she meant to find the lifelong work of substance to prove herself and make her people proud. Racehorse or not, Bessie had a lot in common with a mule. Go ahead, Bessie. Okay. We're gonna look at John Coleman. Look at that illustration. This illustration is beautiful. World War I left me with nightmares and a fondness for dreams. Though neither gave me an excuse for teasing my sister, still I goaded Bessie about going to the Berman School of Beauty Culture and being overeager to avoid hiding herself as a domestic, but she just shrugged, said she had enough of that kind of work back at home. She's got a job buffing men's nails at the high-class barbershop on the Stroll, where I drop in and swap war stories and talk politics with her customers. I point out that she was still a common laborer after a lifetime of telling anyone who listened that she amounted to something big someday. She worked in the shop 5 years when I wandered in one afternoon, blabbing about airplanes and French women who had real careers as pilots. Then I turned to Bessie and joked, "You Negro women ain't never going to fly." Not like those women I saw in France. The barbershop rocked with laughter. Then I heard this snap that was so familiar. It was that steel-strapped mind of Bessie's. "That's it. You just called it for me." She gave up her manicuring job that very day. That's when I knew. Whatever the miracle was required, Bessie would learn to fly. Robert Abbott. Bessie's copper color gave the truth of her away. For one of the cores, she was though slight in appearance, was tough as any metal and always ready and willing to test her strength. That much was clear the day she strode into my office to talk about her future and the future of our people. She was 27 then and planned to be the first colored woman in the world to fly. The problem was, no flight school in our colored-minded nation would accept a woman or a Negro. Wow, she's about to make history, y'all. She asked for my help. Since I too had once been driven by a dream to lift the race, I founded my newspaper on nothing less to go to Paris, I advise. French flyers are the best, and they'll teach anyone. In French, of course. Much to her credit, Bessie didn't even blink. I told her of a Landrick school in Michigan Avenue, and the next I knew, Bessie had enrolled. For 1 year, she studied French and worked in a chili parlor to save towards the aviation school I found her for in France. Good old France. I helped her buy passage on the SS Imperator, and she said the Defender would promote her cause and record her success once she returned with a pilot license in hand. It was 1920, and Bessie was news. You understand, as a publisher, I considered her a wise investment. When Bessie boarded the steamer that ice in November, she became front page story in the making. looking at a reporter man. It was a crisp autumn day when this reporter and others gathered at the New York docks to meet the SS Manchura from France to greet the world's first colored aviatrix who was on board. The lovely lady had traded in a blouse and skirt for a French cut pilot uniform and had ordered a Newpont scout plane to be built for her in Paris, or so she said. Miss Coleman, I understand, gave exhibition flights while in Europe, though I have no proof of such. They applauded me wildly in Berlin for my daredevil skills, she said, in Munich too. A reporter I knew from Chicago Herald offered to report on her story, provided she would agree to pass for white. However, her only response to his offer was laughter. In this reporter's humble opinion, the Herald was the loser, but Bessie was a spellbinder. She spoke with eyes and hands and sweeping gestures. She drew pictures in the air and made the listener believe he was right there inside her story. Bessie Coleman, Aviatrix, could easily have been a great actress of the stage. Sack's the name. Coast Tire is the game. We paid Bessie a fee to mention our company during her interviews, making full use of her as a celebrity. I knew her personally. I was honored to be one of the students she taught to fly, but I'm especially proud to say that our firm helped Bessie purchase her first plane. For my money, I prefer to deal with a person who knows her own mind, and that was Bessie. By the time we met, she knew precisely what she wanted: to start school of aviation in America, where Negroes could learn to fly. That was her greatest dream, and owning a plane would help move her in one step closer to it. She bought herself an old Army surplus plane and arranged for an exhibition at Palmer Park in Los Angeles. 10,000 gathered for the event, but it was not meant to be. On the way to Santa Monica, to the airfield, Bessie's engine stalled 300 feet above the ground. The sound of the crash was heard for miles. For 3 months, she laid in a hospital, impatient for her broken bones to knit through, unwilling to quit the sky, for she believed our people could and should succeed in the world of aviation, and she would not give up until she had convinced us of it. I visited her during the difficult recovery. She just smiled through the bruises and the bloody bandages, painfully propped up herself in the bed, and whispering, ordered me to spread the word, tell them all, as soon as I can walk, I'm gonna fly. Here we go. Lord spoke kindly of the eagle and the dove. This is Reverend Akiza Keith Hill. But he also loved the raven, a strong, mysterious black bird of high intelligence. Is she a creature slighted by many but cared for by God? That was Bessie. She stayed with my wife and I at our Orlando parsonage, and there Bessie renewed her faith. For 2 months, she called my wife and me mother and daddy, her own beloved mother being miles away in Chicago and her father living in parts unknown. Viola and I were proud to be family to Bessie, however brief the time. I am pleased that she soaked in God's word by living with us. Many the hour I found her reading the Psalms, usually by lamplight. She saved the mornings for weeding the vegetable garden out back, both pastimes, she said, reminding her of happy days in Texas. We loved her as our own, and we warmed to see her often, surrounded by children who admired her beauty and her bravery. I prayed constantly for Bessie's safety and was much revered when she agreed to end her barnstorming days and promised to rely more on her lectures as a means of raising funds for the school she bent on building. Her mind was set, she said, on turning Uncle Tom's cabin into a hangar, where she could, at long last, teach our people how to fly. On the porch one night, Viola suggested Bessie might consider opening a beauty shop for extra money. Betsy liked that idea. She was almost ready to settle down anyway, she said. Trying out the quiet life might be nice someday soon. I might have believed it, Lord knows I wanted to, but then, before we went in, I called Bessie out of the corner of my eye. She looked up at the sky for one last glimpse of the blue heaven. That's his name. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that story time. It was a little bit long, but you can break it up and you can see it, you could read it, you could look at the illustrations and have a good time. I enjoyed that. I hope you guys come back again and have a good time. Thank you for joining me for story time. Bye now.